Young and the Restless. Spoilers. Breaking news. The operation began with a calculated display of absolute normalcy. Matt arrived at the high-security correctional facility, projecting the calm, unremarkable demeanor of a standard civilian visitor. He bypassed the initial security checkpoints with practiced ease, carrying no contraband, displaying no nervous tells, and offering the administrative staff nothing more than a polite, forgettable interaction. However, beneath this carefully constructed facade of compliance, Matt was executing the preliminary stages of an incredibly audacious and meticulously detailed prison break. He had not come to offer comfort or conversation. He had arrived to orchestrate a felony extraction targeting one of the facility's most volatile and heavily guarded inmates. Every step Matt took inside the visitor sector was the result of extensive prior surveillance and intelligence gathering. He had acquired detailed knowledge of the facility's operational protocols, guard shift rotations, and the specific architectural layouts of the detention blocks. His objective was Patty, a woman whose history of severe psychological instability and violent outbursts had earned her a secure cell and constant monitoring. Matt understood that breaking her out required more than just brute force. It demanded surgical precision and an exploitation of the human element within the prison's security apparatus. He had identified a critical vulnerability in the routine of the guard assigned to Patty's specific corridor, a momentary lapse in protocol that he intended to weaponize. Moving away from the designated visitor areas under a fabricated pretext, Matt navigated toward the restricted access zones. He moved with a deliberate pace, ensuring he did not draw the attention of the surveillance cameras sweeping the main hallways. His timing was impeccable, aligning his movements with the blind spots he had previously mapped out. When he finally intercepted the targeted guard, Matt did not hesitate. Using a carefully rehearsed distraction, he lured the officer into an alcove entirely obscured from the central security feed. The confrontation was entirely one-sided and brutally efficient. Without uttering a word, Matt delivered a devastating critical strike directly to the back of the guard's neck. The physical execution was flawless, designed to incapacitate the officer instantly without allowing him the opportunity to trigger a radio distress call or vocalize a warning. The guard collapsed immediately, rendering the immediate sector effectively blind and unmonitored. Matt wasted no time checking the man's pulse. His focus was entirely on the heavy ring of tactical keys secured to the officer's utility belt. Stripping the keys and the officer's access card, Matt assumed total control of the corridor's physical security barriers. With the primary obstacle neutralized, Matt moved rapidly toward Patty's cell. The silence in the cell block was a temporary illusion, a brief window of opportunity that would shatter the moment Central Dispatch realized the guard had missed his scheduled check-in. Matt inserted the heavy key into the reinforced steel door, disengaging the primary locking mechanism with a sharp mechanical click. He pushed the door open to reveal Patty, who was sitting in the dim light of her confinement, completely oblivious to the violent orchestration unfolding just outside her door. Patty's reaction was one of profound shock. The sudden intrusion, the sight of Matt standing in the open doorway, and the sheer impossibility of the situation left her momentarily paralyzed. She had resigned herself to the highly regulated, monotonous existence of the penal system, and the abrupt shattering of that reality short-circuited her ability to process the moment. She stared at Matt, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and latent panic, unable to comprehend how he had bypassed the fortress designed to keep her contained. Matt did not afford her the luxury of time to process the event. He understood that every passing second degraded their chances of a successful extraction. Stepping into the cell, he grabbed Patty by the arm, his grip firm and commanding, physically pulling her from her state of shock. He issued rapid, quiet instructions, forcing her to focus on his voice and the immediate necessity of movement. He needed her compliant and mobile, recognizing that her notorious unpredictability could easily become a liability if she panicked during the exfiltration process. Dragging the stunned woman out of the cell, Matt immediately guided them away from the primary corridors. He did not attempt to retrace his steps through the visitor center. That route was already compromised by his failure to return. Instead, he led Patty into a labyrinth of secondary passages, maintenance shafts, and utility corridors that he had identified during his extensive preparation. These routes were rarely patrolled, utilized only by civilian contractors and engineering staff, making them the ideal conduit for a clandestine escape. The physical toll of the escape began to manifest as they navigated the cramped, poorly lit maintenance tunnels. Patty, still grappling with the adrenaline and the surreal nature of her sudden freedom, struggled to keep pace with Matt's relentless forward momentum. He pushed her relentlessly, navigating the subterranean architecture with the confidence of a man who had walked the route 100 times in his mind. He bypassed locked utility grates using the stolen security card and manually overrode secondary doors, exploiting the facility's outdated infrastructure to bypass the modern digital security measures on the floors above. As they moved deeper into the facility's blind spots, the true nature of Matt's plan began to crystallize in Patty's mind. This was not a spontaneous act of mercy. It was a highly calculated strategic acquisition. Matt was risking his own freedom and potentially his life to pull her out of the system, which meant he required her specific set of skills, her history, and her capacity for chaos. She was being drafted into a war she did not yet understand, tethered to a man whose capacity for manipulation and violence rivaled and perhaps exceeded her own. The final breach occurred at the perimeter's weakest point, a loading dock designated for industrial waste removal that Matt knew would be temporarily unstaffed during the shift change. He disabled the exterior magnetic lock, pushing the heavy industrial door open to reveal the sprawling, uncontrolled expanse of the night. The transition from the sterile, claustrophobic environment of the prison to the open air was jarring. They stepped out into the darkness, immediately utilizing the cover of the facility's exterior utility structures to mask their movement from the perimeter watchtowers. It was only then, as they vanished into the dense tree line bordering the prison grounds, that the facility's internal security apparatus finally registered the breach. The blaring, mechanical shriek of the prison's general alarm suddenly tore through the silent night, a deafening siren that signaled the absolute failure of the institution's security protocols. The sound echoed across the grounds, a chaotic broadcast confirming that the authorities had discovered the unconscious guard and the empty, unlocked cell in the maximum security wing. Inside the prison, the scene rapidly devolved into organized chaos. Tactical response teams flooded the compromised corridor, securing the injured officer and initiating an immediate, aggressive lockdown of the entire facility. Floodlights ignited across the exterior perimeter, sweeping the grounds with blinding white light as K-9 units and heavily armed search teams were deployed to hunt down the fugitives. The warden and the Central Dispatch Command scrambled to review the security footage, desperately trying to piece together how a civilian visitor had systematically dismantled their security apparatus and vanished with a high-profile inmate. However, the authorities were reacting to a timeline that Matt had already manipulated. By the time the lockdown was fully enacted and the perimeter secured, Matt and Patty were already miles away, having successfully navigated the initial containment ring before it was even established. They moved rapidly through the darkness, utilizing a pre-staged getaway vehicle hidden on a secluded access road miles from the prison's immediate jurisdiction. The immediate pursuit was effectively neutralized by Matt's precise timing and his anticipation of the institutional response time. The success of this escape signifies a catastrophic failure for the local authorities and introduces an unprecedented threat to the residents of Genoa City. Matt has not merely secured his own freedom of movement, he has actively recruited and unleashed one of the most dangerous, unpredictable elements ever to threaten the community. Patty's deep-seated grievances, combined with her fractured psychological state, make her an incredibly potent weapon. By freeing her, Matt has forged an alliance rooted in shared trauma, mutual exclusion from society, and a profound capacity for vengeance. This daring prison break is merely the prologue to a much larger, darker narrative that Matt is actively constructing. He did not risk everything simply to live as a fugitive in the shadows. The meticulous nature of the escape indicates a broader, highly structured conspiracy aimed directly at those who orchestrated his downfall and those who contributed to Patty's institutionalization. They are now operating entirely outside the boundaries of the law, unburdened by societal norms or the threat of incarceration, making them infinitely more dangerous than they were behind bars. The ensuing manhunt will undoubtedly consume the resources of the police department, forcing the entire city into a state of heightened paranoia and defensive posturing. Every known associate, every past victim, and every familial connection tied to either Matt or Patty will be placed under immediate threat assessment. The authorities are now forced to play a desperate game of catch-up against an adversary who has already proven his ability to outthink, outmaneuver, and violently dismantle established security protocols. As the sirens continue to wail in the distance, serving as a futile warning of what has already transpired, Matt and Patty drive deeper into the night, their alliance cemented by the shared adrenaline of the escape. The freedom they have violently seized is the foundation upon which Matt intends to build his retribution. The residents of Genoa City remain entirely unaware that the structural integrity of their safety has just been shattered, and that a highly coordinated, deeply personal storm is rapidly approaching their doorstep.